Okay guys, we're back, and in this video I hope to hit chapters 11 and 12 more quickly than I've done in some of the previous sections. We can kind of summarize these chapters with their focus. Chapters 11 is about Miss Dubose. Okay, the focus is on Miss Dubose and a confrontation with Jem and her. And it's pretty straightforward. We don't have to do such a heavy, close reading in the text. I just want you to get a couple main points. So if you have a paper book, I'll give you the page numbers in mine as well, but I'll try to point out some things quickly in the text here too. Just got to line it up. So essentially what you have is Miss Dubose, as they walk by her house, she's treating them like garbage and insulting them. Okay. So notice she says here, "Don't you lie to me," she yelled. "Jeremy Finch, Maudie Atkinson told me you broke down her Scoopernong arbor this morning. She's going to tell your father, and then you'll wish you never saw the light of day. If you aren't sent to the reform school before next week, my name's not Dubose." So she's screaming and shouting at them, and then, "Don't you contradict me, and you," she's pointing at Scout here. "What are you doing in those overalls? You should be in a dress and camisole, young lady. You'll grow up waiting on tables if somebody doesn't change your ways. A Finch waiting on tables at the OK Cafe? Ha!" "Come on, Scout," Jem whispered. "Don't pay attention. Just hold your head high and be a gentleman." But Mr. Dubose held us. "Not only a Finch waiting on tables, but one in the courthouse, lawing for niggers." So there you go. So you have Miss Dubose insulting and criticizing based on what? Based on a family reputation, for one. She's saying your family used to be better than this. And then based on racism, also based on kind of gender expectations, because she doesn't think Scout is dressed properly as a young girl. Okay, and now you have the key insult related to the court case. And Jem's going to get really angry because of this. You notice says here, Jem stiffened and Jem was scarlet. So he turns all red and he gets really angry because she's insulting their family. Okay. And so Jem decides he's going to take things into his own hands. He gets angry, goes back home, and then he's going to actually cut her flowers. So let me just find that for you. Okay. So he did not begin to calm down until he had cut the tops off every camellia bush Miss Dubose owned, until the ground was littered with green buds. He bent my baton against his knee, snapped it in two, and threw it down. So the cut flowers are important. The flower imagery, beauty and loveliness, which is the exact opposite of how Miss Dubose is treating them. She's treating them like garbage. She's acting like a horrible human being, insulting them and yelling at them and all of that. But how is Atticus going to, treat the situation? So again, we're going to get Atticus's moral principle to not treat others back the way that they treat us. So he finds out and he asks, "Are you responsible for cutting the flowers?" "Yes, sir." "Why'd you do it?" "She said you lawed for niggers and trash." "You did this because she said that?" "Yes, sir." "Son, I have no doubt you've been annoyed by your contemporaries about me lawing for niggers, as you say, but to do something like this to a sick old lady is inexcusable. I strongly advise you to go down and have a talk with Miss Dubose. Come straight home afterward." Jem did not move. "Go on." I followed Jem out of the living room. "Come back here," Atticus said to me. I came back. All right, so he orders him to go and apologize. And what ends up happening is he has to read to her for a month. Said, "Atticus, she wants me to read to her for a month." And so he actually goes to her house all the time and reads poetry to her. And so the following Monday afternoon, he has to do that. And my paper text has a break in text there. Just trying to find the same thing here. There should be a break here. So the following afternoon, Jem and I climbed the steep front steps of Miss Dubose's house, padded down the open hallway. Jem, armed with Ivanhoe and full of superior knowledge, knocked at the second door on the left. So he's got the book he has to read to her, and basically, while he's reading to her, he notices she's in horrible condition. So what's going on here? In the paragraph starting, "She was horrible. Her face was the color of a dirty pillowcase, and the corners of her mouth glistened with wet, which inched like a glacier down the deep grooves enclosing her chin. Old age liver spots dotted her cheeks, and her pale eyes had black pinpoint pupils. Her hands were knobby, and the cuticles were grown up over her fingernails. Her bottom plate was not in, and her upper lip protruded. From time to time she would draw her nether lip to her upper lip and carry her chin with it. This made the wet move faster. Also, she has other strange behavior. She lay on her back with the quilts up to her chin. Only her head and shoulders were visible. Her head moved slowly from side to side from time to time. She would open her mouth wide, and I could see her tongue undulate faintly. Cords of saliva would collect on her lips, and she would draw them in, then open her mouth again. Her mouth seemed to have a private existence of its own. It worked separate and apart from the rest of her, in and out, like a clam hole at low tide. Occasionally it would say t, like some vicious substance coming to a boil. So all of this describes Miss Dubose as sick, and she is actually going through what we call withdrawal symptoms. And we'll see what that is at the end of the chapter when Atticus explains what's been wrong with Miss Dubose. So that's explained toward the end of the chapter, about the second last page, if I can get to it on this digital one. So Atticus explains here, Miss Dubose was actually a morphine addict. She took it as a painkiller for years. The doctor put her on it. She'd have spent the rest of her life on it and died without so much agony, but she was too contrary. Sir, just before your escapade, she called me to make her will. Dr. Reynolds told her she had only a few months left. Her business affairs were in perfect order, but she said, "There's still one thing out of order." What was that? Jem was perplexed. She said she was going to leave this world beholden to nothing and nobody. Jem, when you're as sick as she was, it's all right to take anything to make it easier, but it wasn't all right for her. She meant to break herself of it before she died, and that's what she did. You mean that's what her fits were? Yes, that's what they were. So why was she all looking sick and thrashing around and whatever? She was actually a drug addict, morphine. It's a kind of painkiller that they would give for operations and other, like in the olden days, they would give that drug more easily to people who didn't really need such a powerful drug, but it's super powerful and super addictive. So she got hooked on it. And before her death, she determined to break free. From that drug. And so just having Jem read to her was a way of distracting herself. Most of the time you were reading to her, I doubt if she heard a word you said. Her whole mind and body were concentrated on that alarm clock. If you hadn't fallen into her hands, I'd have made you go read to her anyway. It may have been some distraction. There was another reason. Did she die free? Asked Jem. As the mountain air, said Atticus. She was conscious to the last, almost. Conscious, he smiled, and cantankerous. That means like annoying and angry and fighting with you. She still disapproved heartily of my doings and said I'd probably spend the rest of my life bailing you out of jail. She had Jessie fix you this box. Atticus reached down and picked up the candy box. He handed it to Jem. Jem opened the box. Inside, surrounded by wads of damp cotton, was a white, waxy, perfect camellia. It was a snow on the mountain. So Miss Dubose gives him a flower gift, the flowers that he had destroyed. She gives him one perfect one. Jem's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Old hell devil, he screamed, flinging it down. Why can't she leave me alone? In a flash, Atticus was up and standing over him. Jem buried his face in Atticus's front shirt. Shh, he said. I think that was her way of telling you everything's all right now. Everything's all right. You know, she was a great lady. So she forgives him for damaging her flowers. She also is apologizing by giving him the gift. And Atticus says she was a great lady. Really? She was a drug addict and shouting at them and insulting their family. A lady, Jem raised his head. His face was scarlet. After all those things she said about you, a lady? She was. She had her own views about things, a lot different from mine. Maybe, son. I told you that if you hadn't lost your head, I would have made you go read to her. I wanted you to see something about her. I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked, okay? It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. Lick means like beat. You know you're going to lose. Even before you begin, you know you're going to lose, but you fight it all the way to the end anyway. You rarely win, but sometimes you do. Miss Dubose won all 98 pounds of her. According to her views, she died beholden to nothing and nobody. She was the bravest person I ever knew. So according to Atticus, bravery is when you know you're going to lose, but you fight it all the way through to the end. So who's doing that as well? Atticus, with the court case. He knows he's going to lose, but it's his job to fight it all the way to the end. And that's what real courage is. So Miss Dubose and Atticus are examples of courage. We'll do Calpurnia's church just briefly in another video. Couldn't fit it in this one. Thanks.